Welcome to episode 6 of Kicking Ass and Taking Names, a podcast for small and mid-sized business owners on law, business, and life. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith, owner and principal litigator at the Griffith Law Group, a business litigation boutique where we defend the Davids from the Goliaths. This week's episode is entitled A Conversation with Me. We all heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, even though I'm not a child, I am very fortunate to have a village that has been very instrumental in helping me grow as a person, as a lawyer, and as a businessman. And consistent with my village, when I started this podcast journey a few months ago, I engaged my team, my board of directors, my village. And some of those people you've seen as guests on my podcast. Many of you have not. But I was very fortunate to get advice, insight, critique about what it is that I've done and what it is I'm trying to do. And one of the things many people in my village have said, they enjoyed the podcast, but they said, Ron, we really don't know, the audience don't really know much about you. And believe it or not, I could talk about almost anything, but I don't particularly care about talking about myself. So I thought of a way I can give the audience, give you more insight into me without me sitting here and talking about myself for the next 30 minutes. As it turned out, about a year ago, I was a guest on a podcast called Lawyers Tell All by Chris Mullins. And even though the focus of the podcast was the target audience, I guess, for the podcast was and remains lawyers, it still, quite frankly, talked about how lawyers run their business or running a law firm. And Chris Mullins was a very good guest, and she asked, I thought, very good questions that caused me to, allow me to give some insights into my why, into how I view the law, and allowed me to discuss, quite frankly, I've been a lawyer for 29 years, half of which as a business owner and a lawyer. And so with 29 years, I have experience, good, bad, and nothing indifferent. And I was able to share some of those lessons in Chris's podcast. I thought it'd be a good idea if I did a conversation with me, as we say. So hopefully many who are in my village have heard or seen this podcast, Ms. Mullins' podcast, but many of you will be hearing it for the first time. I hope that is informative. I hope that is motivational. And I hope that is inspirational. Thank you and enjoy.
It's Chris Mullins with the Intake Academy and Lawyers Tell All. And today I'm going to be interviewing Marlon Griffith. And I'm going to let Marlon go ahead and tell you a little bit about himself.
Yes, hello all. I'm Marlon Griffith, principal litigator and owner of the Griffith Law Group in Washington, D.C., where we help businesses and professionals resolve legal disputes that threaten their financial liberty, their reputation, or their bottom line.
Okay, so the type of law, is it business law?
It's mostly business law, but we also represent individuals or executives who are facing criminal matters as well, and professional licensing issues.
Okay, now how long have you been an attorney?
I've been an attorney for 29 wonderful years.
Oh, and you love it.
I love it.
You love it. That's interesting because a lot of the attorneys that I talk to, like as clients, I would say a good amount of them are burnt out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
What happens? Like, how does that happen?
You know, I've thought about this, and sometimes if you just get caught in the grind of the
Mm,
day to day, um, anybody can get burned out. But you know, I've been very fortunate in my entire career that I've always been able to help individuals, right? Or
mhm,
help small businesses or smaller businesses.
mhm,
And that's kind of what I live to do. I live to help people, help others. So it's very rewarding. It doesn't mean it's not challenging and you don't have your challenging days, challenging weeks.
mhm,
Um, but when the day is done, to know that you are helping your fellow man,
mhm,
fellow person,
mhm,
and is really what I think the law is meant to be, a vehicle to help others. It's
mhm.
been very rewarding.
Okay, so that's important and that's great, but let me ask you this. Even with all that in mind, what have you figured out that it's important that you do or you continue to do in your life, maybe your personal life, so that you can help yourself not get burnt out?
Two things very important. Um, because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and obviously many people on this podcast might have heard of the artist Jay-Z, who
Okay.
came from not too far from where I live, and now he's best known as Beyonce's other half.
There you go.
But he has a particular song when he says, "I'm a businessman," and you have to learn that you are a business and you are running a business.
Mhm,
And one of the very important things about running a business is having other people work for you. That you are not there to do everything yourself. You have to have the ability to hire other people and delegate and train and teach so those people can help you provide the services that you want to provide for your clients.
mhm.
Right. So that's step one. Um, don't do it alone. And step two is that I've learned is how to say no. You cannot be a jack of all trades in the law. You know, everyone may need help, but you may not be the one to help them.
Mm,
And sometimes the best way you can help someone is to refer them to someone else.
mhm,
I have a saying, I don't really ever say no to a referral that comes my way. What I say is, I'm not able to do this, but let me give you a couple of other names that may be able to do it.
mhm, mhm,
Right? Because I don't want anybody, and that's my way of helping you. I may not be able to directly help you
mhm.
provide the services that you need because it may not be what I do,
Right.
right? Or for whatever the reason, but I try to make sure I can refer you to someone else in my network. But that's
Mm,
very important to know how to say no. And that also goes to other aspects of life. When you're an attorney and people in your community know you're an attorney, they ask you to do many things. They ask you to join boards, they ask you to help with this, they ask you to help with that. Everyone has a question. And you just have to know sometimes to say, well, either not right now, or it doesn't really fit what my time is allowing me to do.
mhm,
You just have to learn how to say no.
mhm. That comes with time, right?
Yes,
Yeah, and practice.
it comes with scar tissue, as we say, because I can say that now because many times I didn't say no.
Mhm,
And halfway through whatever I was doing, I wish I had said no. But then I have to finish what I started. But that's now to my detriment. But it's what
mhm.
so you that's how I've learned. So if anyone who's listening to this, learn from my mistakes.
That's exactly
Learn
right.
to say no. All right. Learn to say no.
Yeah, so that you can keep smiling just like you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you.
So let me ask you this. What about like family and family
Mhm.
life balance or personal life balance? How do you, most of the attorneys that I know and work with, they don't really do great at it. Do you
Sure.
do well? And if so, how'd you get there?
It's really interesting, right? I think that I am of the generation where, believe it or not, um, we didn't have cell phones when I was in high school. We didn't even have cell phones when I was in college. right? And it's almost funny that we kind of think back, like, well, how did we ever get in touch with each other? We didn't have
Right.
cell phones,
I know.
right? Can you imagine now walking around, even trying to find a payphone,
I know.
right? And
Yeah.
if you talk to my kids, what's a payphone? What's that?
Oh.
Um, but I talk about it because I found out how amazing it was that somehow we were able to be productive human beings without having a walking computer on our hip
Mhm.
called a phone,
Mhm.
right? So to me is, I have, because I run a business, so obviously my phone is how for people can get in touch with me. But it kind of goes back to what I said about learning how to say no. And sometimes it's about learning how to say no for now,
Mm.
right? So if you are trying to be at your child, your kid's basketball game or event, you want to lock in, right? You want to be present
Yeah.
for what's happening there so you can appreciate it,
Mhm.
right? But some either from habit or whatever, our phone buzzes and we go looking at it, right?
Mm.
And I find amazing. I don't look at my phone when my child is playing a game.
Mhm.
Now I would tell you the truth. If they now sitting on a bench, then I might look at the phone. I mean, I'm a human being. But if they're in the game, I'm watching,
Mhm.
right? And I try to be very intentional about not looking at my phone
Mhm.
because it's habit, and I understand it's habit for all of us.
Mhm.
But I mean, you this whole saying of you need to be present, and when it comes time for your family and doing family things, you need to be present
Mhm.
for that, right? And because today's young people, we all know that they wake up they go to bed with their phone, they wake up with their phone. I mean, if they could go in the shower and take a shower with their phone, if they made waterproof phones, I think these young people will go in the shower with their phones,
Mhm.
right? So if you can
Yeah.
get your child to separate from that phone for some period of time with you, then you got to be locked into that.
Mhm.
You've got to be locked into that, right? So you can kind of stay connected. So I mean, it's not easy. So you have to be intentional about it, because our habits now with the technology that we have, this is a wonderful thing because it's how
Mhm.
you and I can talk, and we are miles and miles apart, and we can have this conversation like if we're in the same room right now. So technology is beautiful,
Mhm.
but we do have to be intentional about our human relationships, right, and our human connection when we in person with each other.
Yeah. And so what's interesting what you were saying like about the basketball game is
Hmm.
if mom or dad are at the game and they're looking at their phone and their child is playing and
Hmm.
sees them looking at their phone, that's that's a big deal. That's like
Yeah.
that can really set that child back. Emotionally, it can change them and how they feel and what they think. And then also, we're also kind of teaching them it's okay. But
Yeah.
the bigger thing is how it really affects them. And I don't think a lot of us think about that detail. I don't think we really think about it at that particular time.
Yeah.
Kids are going to follow us.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And they have greater challenges because they have way more technology, way more things that's now accessible to them. I mean, when I was a little kid, I had a Tonka truck. That was it. That's what kept my attention. The TV only had like 5 channels. At one point, right? And
I know.
so it's just technology is wonderful, but we just have to be intentional about spending time with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so what about like, so your firm, like, are
Yeah.
you the only attorney? Do you have more than one? How many attorneys do you have?
Well, I currently have in staff, we have 3 attorneys currently, and then I also have contract attorneys that I use for certain litigation matters that I have,
Mm-hmm.
which can go to as much as 6 or 7 attorneys total.
Okay. And why did you decide to have your own practice instead of working for a firm?
It's I always, it's the same, right? I always wanted to have my own shingle. I wanted to have my shingle out. I just wanted to have my own business. And it's probably in part due to kind of what I saw or learned from my own father who had his own business, right? Completely different field. Sometimes I think it's probably genetic, you know, what have you, but I just always wanted to have my own business. That being said, though, I didn't take a path to necessarily have my own business because I thought I needed to learn, and I was correct, to learn how to be a lawyer, right? Learn how to practice. And I was very, very lucky to begin my career at first at the public defender in New York, Legal Aid Society in Brooklyn, where I'm from. And then a few years later, I was extremely lucky to be able to move to the best public defender service in the world, in the public defender service here in Washington, D.C., where I truly learned how to be a true trial lawyer. And I mean, that place has created some of the best trial lawyers this country's ever seen. So I got to that point where I felt comfortable, like, okay, I got this. I can try a case. I feel good. I can teach people how to try a case. I feel good. So then it was time to live my other dream of now owning my own business, my own law firm. And that's really important about, other lawyers will be watching this. There's a whole big difference between having a law firm and having a business. And a lot of lawyers go into having their own law firm, which is fine because they want to do what they want to work when they want to work, have the kind of cases they want to have, so forth and so on. But if you don't understand that you're running a business, you will struggle. It won't work. Right? It will be stressful. Right? The law is like any other business. It's a business. It's a service that we provide, or legal services. That's the services that we provide. But the foundation of it is like any other business, right? Whether whether I have a distribution business, whether I have a financial services business, whether I have a candy business, I happen to have a legal business, but it's still a business, so some of the principles still apply. And and it's one thing I've learned is through a course that I take is most lawyers get into law because we don't like numbers. We don't want anything to do with numbers, right? So we run away from numbers. Most lawyers, the only number they know is two numbers: their billable hour and how much money they made, as far as salary is concerned. Anything else beyond that, we don't want no numbers. You cannot run a business without getting comfortable with numbers. You have to know your numbers. And you have to lean into your numbers. You have to get comfortable with your numbers, because your numbers is going to drive your decisions. It's your numbers that should drive your decisions, not the other way around. Right? And most lawyers, most professionals, it's not just limited to lawyers, professionals, right? Don't want that. They just want to provide the quality service that they provide to the clients that they provide it to, and that's how they measure their success. Clients happy, clients happy. But when I first got into business, one of the challenges in being in business was getting paid for my clients who I provided services for. Right? And still some level that's always going to be a challenge, right? But like everything else, you learn how to say no. You know how to, certain people may have big problems, but they may not really value what you can do to help them with their problem. And that will affect what they're willing to pay you and when they're willing to pay you. And you have to be able to say, no, I'm not the one for you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not, like I always say, you wouldn't go to a doctor if you have something is wrong, you're not feeling well. You're not going to go to the emergency room and say, well, I'm only going to let you look at me if you're only going to charge me X. Right? I mean, you got your problem. You want to get it. You want to get your problem alleviated, fixed. You're not going to be bartering with the doctor who's seeing you in the emergency room. And because if you are, maybe you're not as sick as you think you are. Maybe more importantly, you don't value what that doctor can provide for you. And maybe you don't even value how big a problem you have.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe you need to, we don't need to have that type of relationship. And that's fine. But lawyers should not devalue the services that they provide. Right? We work too hard to get this degree.
Yeah.
We work too hard to keep our license. right? So we should not allow anyone to devalue what we do and what we provide. And often we do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to, seems to be a theme here, learning how to say no.
Mm-hmm. Learning how to say no. But let me ask you this. What about mentors?
Sure.
So, I mean, because I think that those mistakes are going to get made no matter what at the very
Of
beginning
course.
until
Yeah.
you hit rock bottom and you say, oh my gosh, this is not working. But
Hmm.
mentors and masterminds and coaches, and that's
Hmm.
so. Do you have any of those support systems? And if so, how'd you get them? And do you still have them now?
Yes, yes, yes. Right. So obviously, when I was early in my career and I was trying to become the best practitioner that I could, majority of my mentors were other practitioners, right? People I wanted to learn from and how to basically perfect my craft, right? Because this is a craft that I have, right?
Mhm.
So that seemed to take the shape of a lot of my mentors. Now, for me personally, I call people in my mentorship my board of directors. I'm the
Mhm.
corporation.
Mhm.
They sit on my board of directors, and I tell them, "You're on my board of directors."
Mhm.
Right. So, my mentors are very diverse as far as fields that they're in and what they look like and everything else. And then when I realized that I wanted to kind of get more into business and run my own business, a lot of my mentors became business owners. I mean,
Mhm.
executives and corporations or what have you. And I was very blessed that people were willing to spend time with me.
Mhm.
Now, part of what helped me was, I'm a golf fanatic, which I never thought I would be growing up in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm a golf fanatic. And the beauty of golf is that you can play golf with someone who is 20 years younger than you and someone who's 20 years older than you. And you all could play in the same group and spend 4.5 hours together and have a ball, right? So I was very fortunate to be able to spend hours on golf courses with people who other people would crave to get 5 minutes with that person. And I was spending 4.5, 5 hours with these individuals, and it's not like and
Mhm.
you were having like conversations here, things there, and building relationships, and then you would connect after you played golf other times, and those people were invaluable in
Yeah.
my life, right, as mentors. But one of the things I also realized I needed to do was that I needed to get help specifically deal with how to run the law business, right? How to run my business,
Mhm.
right? And I did that, right? I stepped out and got engaged in a program that kind of focuses on helping lawyers run their law business,
Mhm.
right? And that has been in the community itself with other lawyers like myself has been invaluable, and the program itself has been invaluable.
Mhm.
So that's the other advice I would give to people who are listening to this. Don't be afraid to seek help.
Right.
Don't, it's not that seeking help doesn't mean that you're not smart. I know
Mhm.
we as lawyers, we think we have to know everything. We got to be the smartest person in the room and this and that and that. And there's a difference between being the smartest and being the most informed.
Mhm.
Sometimes the smartest people are the least informed people because they're so caught up in being smart,
Right. Yeah.
they never ask anyone for help, never ask anyone a why question. They want to be the ones with the answer,
Mhm.
right? So I really implore lawyers who are listening to this to seek help from others, right? And lean into the help that you receive. It's okay to say I need help. It's okay to say I need help professionally, and it's okay to say I need help personally,
Mhm.
right? COVID has brought out more of us having a much more empathy toward people with mental health issues or what have you, right? Which is great. I think that's a great thing. But we should also look at it from a business perspective. It also have people engaged in seeking help from other people about how to help them in their business, because
Mhm.
we always need someone we can talk to about decisions we want to make. And sometimes that best person is not going to be the one that you live with.
Right. Yeah.
It's not their fault,
Mhm.
right? It's not their fault. Um, but that's a reality. Sometimes they're not the best person. They're not going to be the best person for you to talk to when it comes to decisions you need to make in your business that you're running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes you have to ideally know that early on, because if not, you're going to go through a lot of trials and tribulations with that relationship, and
Sure.
that can be difficult. Interesting that you just mentioned the word empathy, because that
Mhm.
was the question I wanted to ask you. Is with all of the clients that we work with and the coaching, whether it's intake or attorneys, the biggest topic that I focus on and that takes the longest to teach is empathy. And I am talking about empathy with, let's just say, intake, when they're on the phone with the prospect and they're hearing the story, empathy from client care or paralegals to clients, empathy from attorneys to clients. There's so many, there's a lot of moments, frequent moments, when empathy is deserved. And most of the time I don't hear it. And I also hear from attorneys or intake or team members saying things like, I'm not comfortable giving empathy. I'm not comfortable giving empathy because I don't know how to, or I feel like I'm crossing a line. It's a boundary. I'll lose my authority. I won't be looked at as strong. I'll be looked at as weak, so on and so on. But it's a big deal, more than people realize until they kind of get in this kind of program. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I've been very lucky in the sense of I spent my first 13 years as a public defender, right?
Mhm.
Um, so and I've shaped my law firm in the same vein. We are a client-centered, we take a client-centered approach to how we deal with our clients, how we deal with our cases,
Mhm.
right? And that really came out of my experience as a public defender. Um, as, as a public defender, you don't choose your client, and your client doesn't choose you, right? But once your name is connected to your client's name, y'all one family. Let's get this. We doing this,
Mhm.
right? That's the attitude. That's what I learned from being at the Public Defender Service of Washington D.C. Right? We are one. We are now one in
Mhm.
that regard, right? So but the origin of that is empathy, because to me the reason I was a public defender in the first place was that I always say, and as it goes to where I am today, is by the grace of God, it could be me.
Mhm.
By the grace of God, it could be someone that I love, right? What can I say that if that was me or someone I love, that is me that I would want representing them?
Mhm.
And how would I want me to represent them? Right? And that's what always keeps me grounded and keeps me humble in that regard, right? Because by the grace of God, it could be me. That's how I look at it in today's world when I deal with my clients, even my business clients, my professional executive level clients. Same thing. Things happen. By grace of God, it could be me.
Mhm.
I
Right.
don't want to be judged. You are not there to judge me.
Mhm.
You're there to help me. You're there to try to understand where I am. Right. Um, so that's how I was trained. I had obviously opportunity to do it over and over and experience it over and over. Um, but you're right. I mean, and I've taken that for granted in a way professionally,
Yeah.
because number one, I've worked with clients for 30 years, like actual clients.
Mhm.
And I know that most lawyers don't really deal with clients. They deal with issues.
Mhm.
Most lawyers don't ever have government client contact. Most lawyers either work for some government entity where the client is the government, whether
Mhm.
state, local, or federal, or they work at bigger firms where they never talk to a client. Their client, for all intents and purposes, is the partner that they're working for, right? So they really don't have client contact. They don't know how to communicate with clients. They don't know that it's okay, that what clients want to know is that you understand what their problem is,
Right.
that you understand why they are there to see you.
Right.
That's what the first thing that they want to know. They don't want to know what school you went to. They don't want to know how many victories you've had. The first thing that they want to know is that you understand why they're there,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And the only way you can show that is by being empathetic, right? It's the only way you can show that. But I do realize that in our in our profession, that's not what they talk about in law school.
No, they don't. No.
When you get to law firms, no one is talking about that at law firms. No one is talking about that at prosecuting in government entities. They're not talking about that, right? So if you're not a naturally empathetic person, because I think it's something you can work on. You may not be naturally that way in a professional setting, but you can work on that. So with my associates who work for me, I make sure to have client contact, and I allow them to watch and see me engage with our clients, right? To see how we talk, to see how we relate, right? Because it's very important, right? But yes, I do acknowledge that in our profession as a whole,
Yeah.
empathy is not the word that's often used to describe lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely can be an uphill battle teaching it and coaching it.
Yeah,
And that's another reason for me doing these podcasts, because you get to talk about things like this.
sure.
And the more attorneys that hear it from other attorneys, hopefully it will help them too. What
Sure.
last thoughts do you have for everybody?
I have plenty, but you said last. I think from a professional perspective, because this is for lawyers, you really have to know your why.
Yeah.
You have to know why you are doing this, right? And you might decide that your why does not correspond with you being a lawyer anymore.
Right.
That's fine. You might find that your why does not correspond with doing the type of law you're doing now. But if you're really not living or working towards your why, then you're not going to be happy. Right? You're not going to be happy. So I think that's very important. That's very important to know your why. And I will go back to what I've said before, learning how to say no.
Well, okay, so I got to ask you this question now. What would you say your why is? I mean, I know that you already said about, helping people and being of service, and I heard that, but to drill down a little bit more, what's your why?
My why is twofold, right? My why is that I want to be free to do whatever I want when I want. That's the deep personal, deep down part of it. I am blessed that my other why is that I live in service. Professionally, I live personally, I live to help people. And I am fortunate that both of those two whys are related and can work together. Because me, in the sense of having a law firm, right, and that helps businesses and executives and professionals, ultimately allows me the freedom to do, relatively speaking, what I want whenever I want. Right? Being a business owner has a lot of stress that comes with the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? But it also has a lot of reward with no one is telling you what to do. Right? No one's telling you what to do or when to do it. Right? And that's who I am. So it works for me. Right. But this knowing my why or even owning my why is not something that just happens, right? You kind of, it's almost like looking backwards. I came to my why by looking backwards. Because I look back at my career, I look back at who I am as an individual and said, okay, well, who am I? Well, I was the guy who was always trying to help this person, help that person. I just happen to now do it professionally in the law. But that's what drives me. Right? If someone sues my client, I want to help my client. Why you have to come after my client? They're working hard to build a business to employ other people, and now you're trying to get a payday on them. Nope, you're not doing that. right? I almost take it personally, right?
Yeah,
Because
right.
now that that's how I go. That's how I roll. That's we are zealous, we are aggressive, but that's why you messing with my client.
Mm-hmm.
A client works hard to get a license, and now the licensing board wants to take away the license because they made a mistake.
Yeah.
One mistake is it takes away 20 years of you working so hard. No way, we're not having that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you always say, by the grace of God, there goes me, right? You're not having that. It's about wise to help you resolve that issue that's in your life right now that's pressing legal issue. Because I know how to say no. That's what I do, legal
Right.
issues,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And it's rewarding to me. It can be stressful. It has its challenges, obviously. But when the day is done, you take a full inventory of it. It's been very rewarding. I've been very fortunate to this point in my career.
Awesome. Well, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Now, is there a way for folks to get in touch with you if they want to?
Oh, absolutely. You can always go
Or, you-
to
or
our
are you going to
website.
say no? Are you going to say no?
No. Well, it depends what they want when they get in touch with me.
Small ends, I'm sticking to your guns.
Yeah, but you can always go to my website www.glgdc.com, glgdc.com, and from there there's different ways you can reach my firm or reach me.
Okay. Got it. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate you.
thank you. All right, everyone. There you have it. Chris Mullins, Intique Academy, and Laura's Tell All. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
You are a business owner, tired of losing sleep at night, or feeling like you're getting your ass kicked and need a strong advocate in your corner. Call the team at the Griffith Law Group, where we defend the Davids from the Goliaths, at 202-499-5160 and schedule a free consultation with me. Let's talk.